Cora Pierce had 11 seconds to make somebody see her before the man waiting at the bottom of the courthouse steps would understand she was not coming back. 11 seconds before her silence would harden into agreement and her granddaughter's life would tilt onto a different track. 11 seconds to stand on the worn limestone landing of the Pocahontas County Courthouse, with a thin September wind pulling at the hem of her gray cardigan, and decide whether 71 years of small kindnesses, quiet courage, and stubborn endurance could still buy her one act of defiance she could not take back. She raised her left hand, slowly as if she were just checking the wind. Her palm faced out toward the empty square, four veined fingers folding down over a tucked thumb, and she held the shape for 3 deliberate seconds, the way the deputy had shown the senior center crowd one rainy Tuesday almost a year ago. Nobody crossing the square looked up. A man in coveralls walked past the war monument with his head down. A girl about 15 pushed a stroller across the crosswalk, eyes on her phone. The clerk who locked the front door at 5 o'clock waved at Vernon Briggs through the glass and turned away without seeing the hand of the woman behind her. Cora lowered her arm, breathed through her nose, and made the signal again. This time her hand shook so badly the gesture looked nothing like itself. She felt the betrayal of her own body, the way her wedding ring slid loose on a finger that had been thinner every winter since Earl died, and she thought about Macy waiting at the community center with her library book and her plastic juice cup and her stubborn refusal to wear a jacket she had outgrown 2 months ago. The third time, Cora set her jaw, planted her right hand on the courthouse rail to steady the left, and pressed her thumb into her palm with all the strength a retired farm wife and 24-hour-a-week records clerk could muster. 4 fingers down, 3 seconds. Eyes fixed on the empty square because she did not dare look back through the glass at the man who was still inside finishing a sentence to a courthouse custodian, smiling the kind of smile that should have warned somebody 9 years ago. That was when she saw the boots. Heavy black leather scuffed at the toes, the kind of boots that had been somewhere harder than a courthouse, coming down the limestone steps, one careful tread at a time from the second-floor entrance. The man wearing them was already at the 4th step from the bottom when something in the angle of her body caught his peripheral vision and his weight shifted onto his back foot, the way a man shifts when he has just decided not to keep walking. Bo Donovan was a head taller than the rail and broad enough that the late afternoon sun threw a long shadow across the limestone, and the patches stitched across the back of his black leather vest read in faded white thread, Iron Crucible MC, and underneath that smaller President Marlin Springs chapter, and underneath that smallest of all, a Marine Corps eagle and globe and anchor sewn just above his heart. He had been at the Pocahontas County Courthouse for the same reason most decent men found themselves there on a Thursday afternoon. Paperwork. Vehicle registration renewals for 2 club bikes that needed to be filed in person because of a clerical mismatch that had refused to resolve itself online, and Bo had learned in 22 years in the Corps and 19 years in the Patch that paperwork was where problems learned to hide. He had not noticed Cora on the way in. There had been no reason to. A small white-haired woman in a gray cardigan with a leather pocketbook over her shoulder, the kind of woman the world treated like it treated tile floors, walked on without seeing. He had nodded at her the way he nodded at every elderly woman he passed, the habit of a man whose own mother had spent the last decade of her life being walked past, and then he had gone upstairs to file his forms. It was the 3rd repetition that froze him. He had come down 2 flights, dropped to the landing, taken the first 3 limestone steps toward the square, and his eye had caught the shape of her hand. Palm out, thumb tucked, 4 fingers closing like a small white cage around the joint, held for 3 full seconds against the front of her sternum. Bo's free hand closed on the iron railing, not because he needed the support, but because something inside his chest had just landed hard. He looked at her face. He counted the rigid stillness in the line of her shoulders, the way an older woman should not stand even in the cold, every muscle locked because relaxing meant collapse. He counted the deliberate, almost mathematical movement of her gaze sweeping the square, the cars, the empty crosswalk, the cracked sidewalk in front of the post office looking for anyone at all. He counted the second time her left hand rose, the deliberate way she steadied it with her right wrist on the rail, like she was preparing to load a rifle she had not held in a long time. On the 4th second of the 4th repetition, he came down the last 3 steps. He did not run. He did not call out. He moved the way 22 years of explosive ordnance disposal had trained him to move toward something that could go wrong if it were touched the wrong way. Steady, aware of the angles, without theater. He stopped 2 paces from her at the corner of the railing where the wrought iron curled into a shepherd's crook over the bottom step, and he lowered his voice the way you lower it for animals that have been hurt by hands. "Ma'am," he said, "you ready to go home?" Cora's eyes lifted. They were a startling gray, the kind that had been blue once and softened, and the whites around them were red, but not crying. She had been holding the tears since the man inside leaned close enough to her ear that she could smell the peppermint candy under his coffee breath. "My granddaughter," Cora said. Her voice had a slight tremor and an unbroken Appalachian lilt, and it carried the particular quiet of a woman who had spent 46 years married to a county deputy and had learned that public composure was a kind of armor. "Is at the community center on Mill Street. She is wearing a green hoodie with a turtle on the front. I do not know if he has somebody there." Bo did not ask who he was. The patches on Cora's hand were already telling him. "How old?" he said. "8 in June. Name Bim. Masi." He pulled a phone from a leather pouch on his belt without breaking eye contact with her. He pressed 3 buttons. The call connected on the second ring. He spoke 6 words. "Cold water. Mill Street Community Center. 8-year-old girl, green hoodie with a turtle name. Makey, do not let anybody but staff take her. I am 5 minutes behind you, full chapter on the move." He did not wait for an answer. He pocketed the phone. He looked back at Cora, and his face did something a stranger would not have read, but a Marine wife would have known in her sleep. A fractional shift around the eyes. The arrival of decision. "Ma'am," he said again, "I need you to walk with me to the bench by the fountain. Slow. Like a friend of mine has come to walk you to your car. I need you to do that without looking back at the courthouse. Can you do that for me?" Cora's hand was still pressed against her sternum. She lowered it. She nodded once, the way you nod when speaking would cost you the last of your composure, and she let Bo Donovan extend his elbow the way he had extended it to his own mother for the last 12 years of her life, and she took it. They walked, slowly. Cora's tan loafers made a quiet sound on the limestone. Bo's boots did not. Halfway across the square, Bo said without turning his head, "Tell me what is happening so I can fix it." And Cora Pierce, who had not asked for help in 9 years and 4 months, who had patched the kitchen window with cardboard the morning her chicken coop blew down because she could not afford glass and feed in the same week, who had driven Masi to the emergency room with a fever of 104, with $2 of gas left in the tank, opened her mouth and let it come out. Her name was Cora Margaret Pierce. She had been born in 1955 in a hospital that no longer existed in Bluefield, West Virginia, the youngest of 4 children of a coal tipple mechanic and a Sunday school teacher, and she had married Earl Pierce in the Methodist Church on Beaver Avenue when she was 19 years old. Earl had been a sheriff's deputy in Pocahontas County for 32 years. He had taught Cora to shoot, to change a transmission filter, to identify 3 kinds of copperhead, and to wait without complaint outside courtrooms while he gave testimony. He had also taught her to read police reports the way other women read recipes line by line, noticing what was missing. He had taught her a great deal that did not show up in any obituary anyone had ever written. He had taught her that you stood for the flag and that you took your hat off in church and that you said yes, ma'am, to women you did not know. He had taught her that the worst people in a town often arrived in good clothes and that the best people in a town often forgot to comb their hair. He had taught her that when you took a man's word and he broke it, you did not raise your voice. You simply remembered the breaking. And the next time he tried to give you his word about anything you said with the courtesy of 40 years of marriage to a deputy sheriff, no thank you. He had taught her to make biscuits from scratch and to clean a gutter without falling off the ladder and to keep 3 pints of buttermilk in the icebox at all times because you never knew when a neighbor would need one. He had taught her that you went to the funeral. Every funeral. Not just for the people you loved, but for the people whose families needed to see somebody walk in the door. Cora had been to 193 funerals in her life by her own count, and she had not skipped one of them since 1976. Earl had died of lung cancer 9 years ago. He had never smoked. The mine air, the doctor had said, the years of going into houses where people boiled tar on wood stoves. Cora had buried him in the cemetery behind the church on a Tuesday morning in February with the ground too hard to dig properly, and 3 deputies still in uniform standing at the back of the small crowd. The pension covered the property tax and the electricity, and not much else. Cora had taken a part-time job in the Pocahontas County Courthouse Records Department 2 months after the funeral. The clerk of court at the time, a woman named Hester Lambert, who had attended the same Methodist church for 40 years, had walked Cora through the filing system in 2 afternoons and offered her 24 hours a week at $15 an hour with no benefits. Cora had taken it. 24 hours a week meant Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays. Tuesdays, she sorted incoming mail from state agencies. Wednesdays, she processed routing slips for case files moving between departments. Thursdays, she handled the special envelopes from the Department of Family and Children Services that came in a green canvas pouch with a state seal, and that for 9 years had been the most boring single category of paperwork in her week. Cora had taken the job thinking it would be temporary. 3 years, maybe 5, until she could decide what she wanted to do with the rest of her life. Then 5 years became 6. Then Sarah died. Sarah Pierce had been her only child, born in 1979. Brilliant at math, terrible at boundaries. Sarah had moved to Charleston for college and not come back, and she had cycled through 4 boyfriends and 2 jobs and 3 apartments in 8 years before she had called Cora one Friday afternoon and said, "Mom, I have a daughter. Her name is Mossy. I do not know what I am doing. Can you come?" Cora had driven to Charleston that night. She had stayed 3 weeks. She had taught her daughter how to swaddle and how to nurse and how to sleep when the baby slept. She had come back to Pocahontas every weekend for 2 years after that. Then Sarah had stopped answering the phone for 9 days, and Cora had driven down on a Saturday morning and found her in the bedroom with Mossy, 2 years old, asleep in the crib in the next room, and the prescription bottle on the nightstand and the needle on the floor. The funeral had been small. Sarah's friends from the bar where she waited tables had brought a casserole. The boyfriend whose name was on the lease had not shown up. Cora had taken Mossy home in the back of the Subaru with a car seat she had bought used from a thrift store in Hinton, and she had become a grandmother who was also a mother again at 66 years of age. For the first 6 months, Cora had cried in the bathroom every morning before Mossy woke up, and then she had washed her face and made oatmeal and gone on with the day. She had not let Mossy see her cry because Mossy had already lived through too much crying for one small life. She had not let the women from church see her cry either because the women from church meant well, but they sometimes saw a widow with a granddaughter the way some people saw an injured bird. And Cora was not an injured bird. She was a woman with a barn and a cabin and a child and a list of things to do before sundown. The grief had not gone away. It had only learned slowly to wait at the back door until the day's work was done. Earl's flannel shirts hung in the closet for 2 years before Cora moved them. Sarah's high school yearbook had stayed on the bedside table for 30 months. Cora had not been able to throw either of them away. She had not needed to. She had needed only to keep doing the next thing on the list, and the list had been long enough to fill every morning of every year. And the cabin on Cedar Hollow Road had been warm enough in February and cool enough in August and quiet enough in between to hold a woman and a small girl through the part of grief that nobody warned you about, which was not the pain but the duration. That had been 5 years and 4 months ago. Cora Pierce had reorganized her life around an 8-year-old. She had put the sewing room back into a bedroom. She had bought a plastic step stool so Mossy could reach the bathroom sink. She had learned that 3rd grade math was different now than it had been in 1962. She had also kept her job at the courthouse records department because the salary, modest as it was, paid for shoes and library fines and dentist visits and the kind of small, ordinary things that an 8-year-old child needs in order to feel like a child instead of a project. Thursdays were the hardest. School let out at 3. Mikey walked 4 blocks to the Marlin Springs Community Center, where the after-school program ran until 6:30. Cora finished her courthouse shift at 5:30, drove the 7 minutes to Mill Street, and picked Mossy up. They went home together. They ate. They read. They slept. It was a routine that had run for 19 months without a hiccup until the 8th Thursday of summer, when Vernon Briggs had walked into the Pocahontas County Courthouse for the first time. He had introduced himself as a community resource coordinator with Hopewell Youth Services. He had said he was doing outreach. He had said it would be a great help if he could spend a few hours each week in the records office to make sure his organization's paperwork was being routed correctly. He had a credentials packet. He had a clean shave. He had a polo shirt with a small embroidered logo. He had a smile that Cora's husband, Earl, if Earl had been alive, would have noticed in less than 30 seconds. The clerk of court had said yes. There was no reason to say no. Vernon Briggs had begun appearing on Tuesday afternoons, then Wednesdays, then Thursdays. He had begun bringing donuts. He had asked Cora about her grandchildren the third week. She had told him about Momsey. He had said what a precious name, and Cora had felt nothing at the time except the faint reflexive pride of a grandmother whose granddaughter had been called precious by a polite stranger. 6 weeks ago, a single brown envelope had arrived in the Thursday DFCS pouch. The return address was the state office of the Office of Inspector General. The contents were a routing directive instructing the records office to assemble all case files and billing summaries associated with Hopewell Youth Services for a triggered audit. Cora had handled the envelope. She had logged it into the system. She had assigned it the docket number that would follow it for the rest of its institutional life. She had filed her own initials in 3 places. She had thought nothing of it. 3 weeks later, Vernon Briggs had stopped bringing donuts. He had still come to the courthouse, but his presence had changed. He had hovered. He had asked questions about file routing that had once seemed casual and had begun to feel pointed. He had asked one Tuesday afternoon whether the records office had any current open referrals from the Inspector General. Cora had said she could not discuss specific open referrals. He had laughed and said, "Of course not," and changed the subject. 2 weeks ago, he had begun volunteering at the Marlin Springs Community Center on Thursday afternoons. He had told the director he had heard they were short on adult presence in the homework room. The director had thanked him profusely. Matey had said the second Thursday grandma there is a new helper named Mr. Vernon, and he asked me what time you come, and he asked where we live, and I do not like him. Cora had said, "Sweetheart, he is just being nice. I will mention it to the director if it keeps making you uncomfortable." She had meant to, she had not. She had been tired. She had been processing payroll forms for the county sheriff's office that week, an extra 15 hours of overtime work that had paid for Massey's eye exam, and she had been functioning on 6 hours of sleep and the leftover coffee from the courthouse pot. That morning, Thursday, September the 11th, Vernon Briggs had walked into the records office at 4:15 in the afternoon. He had closed the door behind him. He had stood with his back against the door and his hands folded in front of him, and he had said, "Mrs. Pierce, I think we need to have a private conversation about your work." Cora had felt the air leave the room. Vernon Briggs had sat down across the desk from her. He had set a manila folder on the corner of the desk. He had not opened it. He had said in a voice that was almost kind that he believed there had been a clerical error in the routing of a recent Inspector General referral. He had said that he believed the matter could be corrected with a simple adjustment to the docket number Cora had assigned. He had said that he understood she was a woman of conscience and that he was a man of conscience and that they could surely come to an understanding. Cora had said, "Mr. Briggs, the docket has been assigned. The system does not allow adjustments after assignment. I think you should leave." Vernon Briggs had not left. He had instead opened the manila folder. Inside were 3 photographs printed on plain office paper. The first was a photograph of Matty Pierce sitting on the low brick wall outside the community center, taken from the parking lot at an angle that suggested somebody sitting in a car with a phone propped on the steering wheel. The second was a photograph of the cabin at the end of Cedar Hollow Road, taken from the gravel turnaround at the foot of the driveway. The third was a photograph of Cora's Subaru parked in the staff lot behind the courthouse, with the license plate clearly visible. Vernon Briggs had said, "Mrs. Pierce, I am not here to make your life difficult. I am here because we both have responsibilities. Your granddaughter is at the community center this evening. She will be in the homework room until you pick her up at 6:30. I am there from 4 until 6. I would prefer for both our sakes that we resolve the docket matter before then." Cora's hand on the underside of the desk had closed so hard her knuckles had gone white. She had said in a voice she did not recognize, "I need to step outside. I need a moment. There is a window air conditioning unit on the second floor that has been bothering me. I will think about what you have said." Vernon Briggs had smiled. He had said, "Of course. Take your time. I will wait in the hallway." He had picked up the manila folder. He had walked out of the records office. He had stood in the hallway by the water fountain with his arms folded across his polo shirt, watching the records office door. Cora had risen. She had taken her cardigan from the back of the chair. She had walked out past him without looking at him. She had walked to the end of the corridor. She had taken the limestone stairs down to the south entrance. She had pushed open the heavy oak door. She had stepped out onto the landing. The September wind had hit her face. The square had been almost empty. She had stood at the rail for 30 seconds, simply breathing. She had watched the way the late sun caught on the wrought iron rail at the edge of the landing. She had watched a single sparrow drop from the courthouse roof to the limestone wall of the post office across the square. She had thought about Macy's small back curled against her chest the night before. The warm, slow rise and fall of breathing she had memorized by feel because she had spent so many nights checking on her after the bad dreams. She had thought about Earl's voice in the kitchen on a Sunday morning, saying the thing he had said almost every Sunday morning for 30 years, which was, "What would you like for breakfast, sweetheart?" even though Cora always wanted the same thing, which was 2 eggs over easy and one slice of toast cut in half with the diagonal going from the upper left to the lower right, because she was particular about that, and Earl had thought it was charming. She had thought about her own mother in the kitchen in Bluefield in 1964, telling her baby the world is full of bad men, and the only thing that protects a woman from a bad man is another woman who knows how to count. Then she had remembered. It had been November. The Pocahontas County Senior Center had hosted a deputy from the sheriff's office for a personal safety presentation. Cora had gone because the senior center had served coffee and apple cake afterward, and because Earl had once worked with the deputy's father. The deputy had spent 40 minutes talking about scams, about door-to-door grifters, about prescription medication fraud. Then in the last 10 minutes, he had shown a video about a hand signal that had been developed for victims of domestic violence and had since spread to abducted children. He had demonstrated it twice. Palm out, thumb in, 4 fingers folded down. Hold for 3 seconds. Silent. Universal. Cora had practiced it at the table along with the 8 other older women in the room, and afterward they had laughed about how they had needed a signal for the boredom of Bridge Club, and she had not thought about it again for 10 months. She had thought about it on the courthouse steps. She had raised her hand, the first time badly, the second time better, the third time well enough. Now she was walking across the square with her arm tucked through the elbow of a stranger in a leather vest, and the stranger was a 6'3" Marine Corps veteran with a son's name on his wrist and a phone in his pocket that had just put 23 motorcycles in motion across 2 counties, and she was telling him all of this in the calm, slow, precise voice that was the only voice she had ever learned to use when something terrifying was happening. Bo Donovan listened without interrupting. He walked her past the fountain. He walked her past the war monument. He walked her around the side of the courthouse to the staff parking lot at the back where her Subaru sat next to the dumpster. He did not let her get into it. "Cora," he said. It was the first time he had used her first name. "I need you to wait by the back wall, not in the car, not visible from the second-floor window. I have a brother who will be here in 9 minutes who knows how to talk to detectives. Stay against the wall. Do not look at the second floor." Cora looked up. The second-floor window of the records office faced the staff lot. The blinds were half open. She could see the shape of Vernon Briggs standing inside looking down at the dumpster. Bo saw it too. He stepped between her and the window without moving his head. His size made the angle. "He cannot see you," Bo said. "He can see me. Stay where you are." "What are you going to do?" Cora said. Bo's mouth tightened. "I am going to wait for my brothers. I am going to call a detective I know from before I was in the patch. I am going to make sure that man does not leave this building tonight unless he leaves it in a county car. I am not going to lay a hand on him. Do you understand me?" Cora nodded. "I have a granddaughter the same age as your Masi," Bo said quietly. "She lives in Knoxville with my daughter-in-law. I see her once a month. If somebody had put a photograph of her on a desk, I would also have walked outside and made a sign. You did exactly what you were supposed to do." Something in Cora's throat broke. "I should have listened to her 3 weeks ago," she whispered. "She told me about him. You listened today." "It might not have been today. He had photographs of her." "It was today," Bo said. "Today is what counts." The first motorcycle came down County Road 219 at 4 minutes after 5. The sound carried across the rooftops of the small business district of Marlin Springs and into the staff lot behind the courthouse, low at first, and then higher and harder as the second and third and fourth bikes joined it. By 5:06, the rumble had become a particular kind of noise that has its own meaning in small Appalachian towns. And the woman at the dry cleaners across the street stepped onto her front step. with a pile of someone's plastic-wrapped suits in her arms and stood there frowning. 23 motorcycles pulled into the courthouse square in single file. They parked head-in along the curb in front of the post office, in front of the war monument, and along the side street behind the volunteer fire station. The riders cut their engines. They dismounted one by one. They did not shout. They did not gather in a pack. They stood by their bikes in a loose perimeter around the square, hands at their sides, vests catching the late sun. The clerk of court at her desk on the second floor lifted her head from her paperwork and walked to the window. She looked down. She turned and walked into the records office. The records office was empty. She walked into the corridor. She saw Vernon Briggs standing at the water fountain with his cell phone pressed to his ear and his back to her, and she heard him say into the phone in a voice she had never heard him use before, "I do not care. Get the car. Get out of here. The back lot now." The clerk of court was 62 years old. Her name was Hester Lambert. Her husband had worked the night shift at the railroad maintenance yard for 38 years. She knew the sound of motorcycles. She knew the sound of a man who had just been caught. She walked back into her office. She called the Pocahontas County Sheriff's Dispatch on the desk line. She said, "This is Hester Lambert at the courthouse. I need a detective to the south entrance immediately, and tell whoever you send to come around to the back lot there is a situation." Detective May Riggs of the Pocahontas County Sheriff's Office took the call at 5:09. She was 48 years old, a 21-year veteran of the department with a son in his second year of college at Marshall and a husband who taught shop at the high school. She and Bo Donovan had attended the same Methodist church when she was small. Her father had ridden with the Iron Crucible Marlin Springs chapter for 15 years before he died. May Riggs and Bo Donovan had a working relationship that had no name on any form. She was at the courthouse in 4 minutes. Vernon Briggs came out the back door at 5:11. He was carrying his manila folder. He was walking fast. His shoulders were up. His face was carefully blank. He had taken 3 steps toward the staff lot when he saw the man in the leather vest standing between him and his car, and behind him the small white-haired woman in the gray cardigan against the wall, and behind her the side street where 3 motorcycles had pulled into a triangle that closed off the alley. Vernon Briggs stopped. Bo Donovan did not speak. Vernon Briggs said in a voice he tried very hard to make sound, "Annoyed gentlemen, I do not know what you think you are doing, but you are interfering with a county employee performing official duties." He held up the manila folder. "I have business with this woman." Bo said quietly, "The business is over." Vernon Briggs took half a step sideways. The man at the corner of the alley moved with him. Vernon Briggs took half a step back. The man at the dumpster moved with him. Detective May Riggs came around the corner of the building at 5:13 with her badge already in her hand. "Vernon Briggs," she said, her voice had no warmth in it, "I need you to set the folder on the ground and step back from it." Vernon Briggs turned. His face shifted the way faces shift when a man recalculates in a single second. "Detective," he said, "I do not know what these gentlemen have told you, but there has been a misunderstanding. Mrs. Pierce and I were having a routine work discussion about case file routing. She seems to have become agitated. I was concerned about her, frankly." May Riggs did not move. "Mr. Briggs," she said, "set the folder on the ground." Vernon Briggs set the folder on the ground. "Step back from it." He stepped back. "Hands where I can see them." He raised his hands. May Riggs picked up the folder. She opened it. She looked at the first photograph. She looked at the second. She looked at the third. She closed the folder. She did not speak for 4 seconds. When she spoke, her voice was flat. "Vernon Briggs, you are being detained for questioning in regard to allegations of intimidation of a public official, stalking of a minor, and possible interference with a state inspector general investigation. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you." She finished the Miranda warning at 5:15. A deputy in uniform came around the corner with a pair of handcuffs. Vernon Briggs put his hands behind his back without resistance, because a man whose whole 9-year operation has been built on never being touched understands very quickly when a perimeter has closed. Bo Donovan stood between the wall and Cora the entire time. He did not turn around. He did not need to. When the deputy walked Vernon Briggs around the corner toward the patrol car parked on the side street, Cora finally let her shoulders drop. She had been holding them in a single rigid line since 4:15 that afternoon. 3 full hours. Her right hand was cramped where she had been gripping the rail of the courthouse steps. Bo turned to her. "Maki," she said. "On her way. Coldwater has her. He is bringing her to the annex conference room. We will meet them there." The annex conference room of the Pocahontas County Courthouse was a small carpeted room on the ground floor with one window, a long table, 6 chairs, and a coffee maker that nobody had cleaned since 2019. A victim advocate named Penny Whitlow had been pulled in from the prosecutor's office. A glass of water sat on the table in front of an empty chair. At 5:34, the door opened. Coldwater Cole Hendricks, 57, gray-bearded in his own vest with a sergeant-at-arms patch above the heart, walked in holding the hand of an 8-year-old girl in a green hoodie with a turtle on the front, a plastic juice cup in her free hand, and an expression on her small face that lay somewhere between bewilderment and joy. "Grandma," Mackey said. Cora's knees did not hold. She sat down hard in the chair before she meant to, and Métis ran the last 3 steps and climbed into her lap and pressed her face into Cora's neck, and did not cry, but breathed in a particular ragged way that was the breath of a child who had been holding herself together for somebody she loved. Cora wrapped her arms around her granddaughter and did not say anything. There were not words yet. There would be words later. There would be statements and depositions and trial dates and a forensic interview and a federal task force and a long, terrible accounting. There would be the gradual public unraveling of 9 years of a man's institutional fraud, and there would be a tally of victims that would grow. But not yet. For 1 minute, in 17 seconds in the annex conference room of the Pocahontas County Courthouse, on a Thursday afternoon in the second week of September, Cora Pierce held her granddaughter and breathed her in and counted the small, warm weight of her against her chest like a person counts the heavy gold of a coin she has been allowed to keep. Bo Donovan stood by the door. Coldwater stood beside him. Neither man spoke. After the minute and 17 seconds, Massey lifted her head. She looked at Bo. She studied his vest. She studied the name on his wrist. She studied his face with the open, slightly fearless curiosity of a child who has just decided that the man in the doorway has come to help. "Are you the one Grandma made the sign for?" she said. Bo's mouth tightened around something he did not let his face do. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "How did you know what it meant?" "A friend of mine showed me a long time ago," Bo said, "when my own little girl was about your age." Macy nodded, accepting this the way children accept things adults are not yet ready to explain. She looked back at her grandmother. "I told you he was weird," she said. Cora let out a single sound that was half a laugh and half something else, and held her closer. "You did, sweetheart," she said. "You told me. I should have listened the first time. You listened today." It was the same thing Bo had said to her an hour before in the staff lot, and Cora looked up at him over the top of Macy's head with an expression that she could not have put into words. And Bo Donovan, who had been told by an Army psychologist in 2009 that he was not going to feel anything in particular ever again, felt something land in his chest that he had not felt since he had stood on a tarmac in North Carolina holding a small folded flag in his hands. He stepped back into the corridor. He pulled the door closed behind him. He stood in the hallway for a long moment with his hand flat against the wood. He counted his breaths the way the Army psychologist had taught him to count them. In the bad year, 4 and 4, held 4 out. 4 held until the heat behind his eyes settled and his jaw unlocked. He had not expected the small girl. He had expected the grandmother. The grandmother he had been ready for. The grandmother he had walked across the square with. But the small girl in the green hoodie with the turtle on the front and the plastic juice cup in her hand had looked up at him from the lap of her grandmother with the same exact unself-conscious curiosity that another small girl had once looked up at him with on a tarmac in North Carolina in the spring of 2001, with the tags on her tiny duffel bag still showing the airline routing for the trip her mother had brought her on. And Bo Donovan had not been ready for that part. Then he walked down the hall toward the south exit where his bike was parked at the curb in front of the post office, and where 22 other men in vests were standing in the September dusk, waiting for him to tell them what came next. The wind had picked up. The flag over the courthouse was snapping. A single dry leaf skittered across the limestone landing where Cora had stood 3 hours earlier and raised her left hand to the empty square. Bo Donovan had looked at the landing as he passed it. He stopped. He climbed the 3 steps up to it. He stood for half a second exactly where she had stood. He looked out across the square the way she had looked. Nothing. Empty crosswalk, empty bench by the fountain, a boy on a bicycle going past the volunteer fire station. He understood in a way that words would never quite hold what it had cost her to stand there for those 3 repetitions and to keep believing somebody might see. He came down the steps. He walked to his bike. He swung a leg over the saddle. He looked at Coldwater across the square. "Clubhouse," he said. Coldwater nodded. 23 engines turned over. The sound of them leaving Marlin Springs that Thursday evening would be a story told in the diner on Main Street for the next 11 months, and the woman at the dry cleaners would tell it best because she had seen Cora Pierce walked out of the staff lot half an hour later, by a Marine and his sergeant-at-arms, and she had seen the small girl in the green hoodie waving at the bikes through the back window of a county car. And she had understood for the first time that the men who rode through her town twice a year on memorial rides for fallen brothers were not perhaps what the magazines and the evening news had told her they were. She would tell her husband over dinner that night, "You know, I think those boys did a thing today." He would say, "What kind of thing?" She would say, "I do not know yet. I think we are going to find out." The clubhouse of the Iron Crucible Motorcycle Club. Marlin Springs chapter sat on 3 acres of cleared timberland 4 miles outside town on Possum Hollow Road. It was a low cinder block building that had been a feed warehouse in the 1960s and a tire shop in the 1980s before the chapter had bought it in 1994, with cash and a handshake from a man named Otis Vaughn, who had ridden with the original Bluefield charter. The building had been added to and patched and repainted so many times that almost no 2 walls were the same year, but the inside was clean and warm and smelled like coffee and bar soap and the particular brand of leather conditioner that the founding chair had bought in 55-gallon drums in 1996 and had not stopped buying since. Bo Donovan walked through the front door at 6:44 that Thursday evening with Coldwater at his right elbow, and the door slammed shut behind him in the wind. The main room held a long oak table with 12 chairs around it, walls covered with framed photographs of rides going back to the founding, a black and white print of the original founding chair in a Vietnam-era jungle hat, a glass display case of patches and dog tags, and one folded American flag in a triangular case under the name Earl Pierce, Sworn Brother Emeritus, End of Watch, February 11, 2017. Bo had not put that flag in that case 9 years ago, thinking he would ever stand under it with Earl Pierce's widow waiting at his side, but life had a way. 5 men were already seated at the table. Coldwater took his usual chair to Bo's right. The other 4 did not need to be introduced because they had known each other for an average of 22 years apiece. The youngest of them, Knox Boone, sometimes called Kettle Drum, because he had played the timpani in the high school band in Lewisburg in the 90s, before he had grown into a man who could break a financial paper trail open in 11 minutes flat, opened his laptop on the table at 6:46 and started typing without being asked. The oldest, Jeb Armstrong, sometimes called Chainsaw, 71 years old, founding charter member, sat in the chair closest to the wall with the framed flag, and his hands rested on the table, palm down, without moving. Bo remained standing. He set his vest over the back of his chair. He poured himself a cup of coffee. He did not drink it. He turned to face the table. "Vernon Briggs," he said, 47 years old, licensed by the West Virginia Department of Health and Human Resources as a foster care coordinator since 2001, director of Hopewell Youth Services, a registered nonprofit operating in 5 counties of southeastern West Virginia, Boy Scout troop leader, volunteer at Pocahontas Memorial Hospital, volunteer at the Marlin Springs Community Center for the past 2 months, clean background check, clean credit history, spotless professional reputation. He set the coffee cup down. And the man who tried to buy off Cora Pierce this afternoon with photographs of her granddaughter on a low brick wall outside the community center on Mill Street. The room went quiet. Hank Steele, sometimes called Broadside because his shoulders did not fit through any standard doorway in the building, leaned forward. Hank was 49. He had been a middle school counselor in Pocahontas County until 2018, when he had reported a student's stepfather to administration and watched the matter routed to the school board's lawyer and not to the Department of Family and Children's Services. He had resigned the following Monday. He had worked construction for 2 years afterward, then taken a job driving a heating oil truck in winter and a county school bus in fall and spring. He had ridden with the chapter since 2003. "He has done it before," Hank said. "It was not a question." "That is my working assumption," Bo said. "I want it confirmed." Knox Boone's fingers had not stopped moving on the laptop. He spoke without looking up. Hopewell Youth Services, he said. 501c3. Registered with the IRS in 2011. Most recent Form 990 filed last March shows annual revenue of $312,400. 3 full-time employees on payroll. Vernon Briggs as executive director, Crystal Calloway as administrative assistant, and a contract bookkeeper named Roy Slade, who has filed for the organization for 9 consecutive years. Hold on, Roy Slade, Coldwater said. I know that name from somewhere. He runs a one-man tax preparation office out of the strip mall on Edray Road, Knox said. He has filed taxes for half of Marlin Springs since before I was born. That means nothing, Coldwater said, but hold the name. Operating account at the State Bank of Pocahontas, Knox continued. I am pulling transaction histories now. He typed for 2 minutes. The room did not speak. Bo drank his coffee. It was cold. Monthly transfers, Knox said. His voice changed. From the Hopewell operating account to a personal checking account in Vernon Briggs's own name. $4,200 per month. Like clockwork. First business day of every month, dating back to January of 2017. That is embezzlement, Hank said. That is just what I have in 3 minutes, Knox said. Let me find the billing records. 5 more minutes passed. Coldwater poured a second cup of coffee for himself. Jebba Armstrong had still not moved his hands from the table. Got it, Knox said. 3 current case files in the Hopewell billing system that do not match anything in the active FCS placement database. One showing as a child named Travis Lawson, aged out March of 2021, but billing continued through August of 2023. One showing a child named Demetrius Tatum, aged out August of 2020, billing continued through May of 2023. One showing a child named I am cross-referencing now. He typed, he frowned. This is the ugly one, he said. He turned the laptop so the others could see. Case file number, he said, pointing at the screen, shows a placement that has been billing $1,850 a month consistently since May of 2018. Child's name on the file is Tamara Mae Henning, listed as date of birth April 19, 2008. I just ran the Social Security number through the federal database. He looked up. It comes back as never issued. Coldwater set his coffee down. The clay mug made a small, hard sound on the oak. He invented a child, Coldwater said. He invented a child, Knox confirmed. He has been billing the state of West Virginia for $1,850 a month for a child who does not exist, for 5 years and 4 months. That is $118,400 on one ghost file. Add the other 2 ghost files, Bo said. Travis Lawson, aged out March 21, billing through August 23. That is 29 months at $1,850, $53,650, Knox said. Demetrius Tatum, aged out August 20, billing through May 23, 33 months at $1,850, $61,050. He paused. 3 ghost files, $233,100 in fraudulent placement stipends. Plus the monthly personal transfers, Coldwater said. $4,200 a month for 104 months. $436,800 from the operating account into his pocket. Total documented theft, Knox said, $669,900. Hank Steele put his face in his hands. Chainsaw Jeb Armstrong finally moved. He turned his head slightly toward the window. He looked out at the gravel lot where 23 motorcycles were parked under the security lights. Then he turned back. 9 years, he said. His voice was the voice of a man who had spent 30 years swallowing rage so that he could speak quietly to his children. The system did not catch him for 9 years. The system did not look, Coldwater said. He kept the monthly amount small enough to pass the automated flag thresholds. He had clean professional credentials. He had institutional standing. And the one formal complaint that was filed against him in 2021 was administratively buried by a DFCS supervisor named Clarence Bishop, who I have been watching for 3 years, who took early retirement on full pension in November of 21 and now lives in a 4-bedroom house in Lewisburg that he should not be able to afford. You have been working this case, Bo said. I have been waiting for somebody to give me a reason to make it official, Coldwater said. Bo looked at him for a long second. Tonight you got one. The phone in Bo's vest pocket vibrated at 8:47. He pulled it out. The number was unfamiliar. He answered anyway. Donovan. Mr. Donovan. A woman's voice. Older. Frightened. My name is Loretta Hogan. I worked at the Department of Family and Children's Services for 31 years. I am retired now. I heard about what happened at the courthouse this afternoon. I need to talk to somebody tonight before I lose my nerve. Or I lose. Bo looked across the table at Coldwater. Where, ma'am? There is a Waffle House on Route 219 north of Mill Point. I am sitting in the back booth right now. I have a folder with me. I have been carrying it in my purse for 3.5 years. I will be there in 22 minutes, Bo said. The line went dead. Bo pocketed the phone. He looked at the table. Loretta Hogan, he said. Coldwater was already reaching for his keys. The Waffle House on Route 219 sat at a gravel pull-off between two ridges, the kind of Waffle House that ran 24 hours and was the only lit building for 9 miles in either direction at night. Loretta Hogan was 68 years old. She wore a navy blue sweater and reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and she had not touched the cup of coffee in front of her in 20 minutes. The folder on the table beside her was a manila accordion file held shut with a thick rubber band. Bo and Coldwater slid into the booth opposite her. Loretta looked at Coldwater, and her eyes widened slightly. Cole Hendricks, she said. I used to see you at the courthouse when you were a detective. You were the kind one. Yes, ma'am. You retired 4 years ago. 5, she nodded. I should have come to you 4 years ago. She set her reading glasses on the table beside the folder. Her fingers were stiff with arthritis at the second joint. She pressed her palms together for a moment, the way a woman in church might compose herself before standing to sing. I have been a Methodist for 68 years, she said. I have been a Department of Family Services employee for 31 years. I have been a wife for 41 years. I have been a grandmother for 19. Of all those things, the one I have failed at worst is the one I had a salary to do. The other ones I just got lucky with. The DFCS job. The state paid me to do correctly, and I did it correctly for 29 years and incorrectly for the last 2. And the part that I did incorrectly is the only part that anybody will remember after I die. I have made peace with that. She looked at Bo across the table. I came tonight because I do not want to die with this in my purse. My husband had a stroke last month. The doctor told us this week he has maybe 2 years. After he is gone, I am alone in that house with a fireproof box in the closet and a folder I have been carrying for almost 4 years, and if I die first, I will die with it inside me. I do not want that. I do not want my grandchildren to learn what I had been keeping from a newspaper article instead of from me. Tell me what you brought. Loretta laid her hands flat on either side of the accordion file. She did not open it yet. March of 2021, she said. A boy named Travis Lawson came into the Lewisburg DFCS regional office. He was 16 years old. He walked there from his Hopewell foster placement because he did not have a ride. He came to the front desk. He asked to file a formal complaint against his placement coordinator, Vernon Briggs. I was the intake supervisor at the front desk that morning. She paused. I sat with that boy for 2.5 hours in the small interview room. He told me what had been done to him. He told me names. He told me dates. He named the other 2 foster boys at the same placement who had been hurt. He gave me a notebook he had written it all in. He asked me whether he was crazy. He asked me whether anybody would believe him. Her voice was perfectly steady. Her hands were not. I told him yes. I told him I believed him. I told him the system would protect him. She picked up the accordion file. She slid it across the table. I logged his complaint. I assigned it the intake docket. I notified my regional supervisor that afternoon. The regional supervisor was Clarence Bishop. He told me to walk the file to his office personally. I did. He took it from me. He told me he would handle it from there. She drew a single breath. 3 weeks later, I asked Clarence what was happening with the Lawson complaint. He said it had been resolved internally. He said Travis had recanted. He said the matter was closed. I asked to see the documentation. He said it was confidential. She lifted her chin. I knew Clarence Bishop. I had worked with him for 9 years. I knew what his face did when he was lying. I knew what his face did when he was being paid. The waitress walked past the booth with a coffee pot. Coldwater put his hand over his cup. Why did you not push it? Bo said, not unkindly. Loretta's eyes filled but did not spill. Because I was 64 years old, she said. Because I was 18 months from retirement. Because Clarence Bishop had the power to write a single line in my personnel file that would dissolve my pension. Because my husband had been on dialysis for 9 months and we had 2 grandchildren in college and our health insurance ran through my job. Because I told myself that Travis had been moved out of the placement and was no longer in danger. And that was the only thing that mattered. And the rest of it would catch up to Vernon Briggs eventually. She looked at the folder on the table. I made a copy of every page of Travis Lawson's notebook the night before I gave the original to Clarence Bishop. I took it home. I put it in a fireproof box in the back of my bedroom closet. I told myself I would bring it forward when the time was right. She raised her eyes. The time was always right, every day for 3 years and 7 months. I just was not. Bo took the accordion file. He set it on the booth seat beside him. He was going to kill that boy, Loretta said. Her voice was barely a whisper. I did not know it at the time. There were rumors in the Hopewell building. A staffer who quit in 2020 told me she had seen paperwork that looked like a life insurance policy on a foster child. I dismissed it. I told her she had misread. I told her foster coordinators sometimes carry incidental policies for emergency burial coverage. She closed her eyes. I lied to her face. Bo and Coldwater did not speak. I am ready to testify, Loretta Hogan said. I am going to lose my pension. They will charge me with obstruction. I do not care. I am going to lose it anyway when this comes out, and I would rather lose it because I told the truth than because I kept it hidden. Coldwater reached across the table. He laid his hand briefly over hers. Loretta, he said, the pension is not as cooked as you think. We are going to bring you to the FBI before the state hears any of this. There is a federal cooperator program. You will not walk away clean, but you will walk. She looked at him as if she had not heard the word federal cooperator out loud in any context that involved her ever. All right, she said, all right. She picked up her coffee. Her hand was no longer shaking. She drank half of it in one swallow. There is one more thing, she said. Yes, ma'am. Clarence Bishop did not work alone in bearing that file. He had it signed off on by his deputy at the time, a woman named Crystal Calloway. Crystal Calloway left DFCS 2 months later. She took a job at Hopewell Youth Services as the administrative assistant. Bo and Coldwater looked at each other across the table. Tell me, Bo said carefully, that you are certain of that name. I hired Crystal Calloway in 2012, Loretta said. I trained her. I signed her employment paperwork the day she left for Hopewell. I am certain of that name. Friday morning came in cold and bright over Cedar Hollow Road. Cora Pierce woke at 5:40 as she always did and lay in bed for a full minute before she remembered why her chest felt different. Then she remembered. Then she got up. Métis was already awake in the bedroom across the hall, lying on top of her quilt in her flannel pajamas, watching the ceiling fan. Cora sat on the edge of the bed and put a hand on her granddaughter's forehead. Bad dreams, she said. Not really. Want breakfast? Pancakes. Pancakes. Cora made pancakes. She made them on the cast iron griddle Earl had bought at a flea market in 1978. She made them with butter in the cheap pancake mix from the dollar store and a single egg, and Macy ate 4 of them with peach preserves the way she had eaten them every Saturday morning for the past 2 years. At 8 o'clock, Cora's cell phone rang. The display said Pocahontas Memorial Hospital. Cora answered. A woman on the other end identified herself as Dr. Sarah Kowalski's nurse and said that Dr. Kowalski had been contacted by Detective Riggs and had cleared her morning to see Massey as a courtesy. Cora said, ma'am, I do not have insurance for a same-day appointment outside of an emergency. The nurse said, Mrs. Pierce, please bring Massey in at 9:30. Dr. Kowalski has asked me to tell you specifically that there is no charge. At 9:15, Cora and Massey were getting in the Subaru when a motorcycle pulled into the gravel turnaround at the end of the driveway. Cora's hand tightened on the door handle. Then she saw the patches. Wyatt Carver, sometimes called Flintlock because he had carried a flintlock musket in a colonial reenactment group when he was 20, was 63 years old and a retired Army combat medic. He had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and 2 in Iraq before his knees had given out. He had a graying beard and pale blue eyes, and he carried a leather trauma bag strapped behind the rear fender of his bike that had been continuously stocked since 2007. He cut the engine. He pulled off his helmet. Mrs. Pierce, he said, Mr. Donovan thought you might want a hand getting to the hospital. Your Subaru's got a taillight out, and I figured if you would not mind, I would follow along behind, just in case. Cora opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I would appreciate that, she said. Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am. Wyatt Carver followed Cora's Subaru into town behind her at a respectful 3-car lengths. Massey watched him in the rearview mirror the whole way and pronounced him the medicine biker before they had gone 2 miles. At the hospital, Dr. Sarah Kowalski examined Massey for 47 minutes. She was 53 years old, a Lewisburg native of Polish ancestry, whose grandfather had immigrated from a small town outside Krakow in 1947, and whose grandmother had run a bakery on the courthouse square until she died in 1991. She had been practicing pediatrics in Pocahontas County for 19 years. She had seen exactly the kind of child Massey was once a week for 19 years. She came out of the exam room afterward and sat down across from Cora in the small consult office. Physically, she is fine, Dr. Kowalski said. No marks, no signs of inappropriate touch. There is no medical concern. Cora closed her eyes. Emotionally, she is a child who has been frightened by an adult she trusted, Dr. Kowalski continued. She is going to need somebody to talk to. I have a colleague who works specifically with children Macy's age. Her practice runs on a sliding scale based on family income. I have already called her. She has Tuesday afternoons open. I would like to refer Massey to her. Cora nodded. There is no charge for that referral either, Dr. Kowalski said. Cora opened her eyes. Dr. Kowalski, she said, I am grateful. I am also a private person. I do not take charity well. Mrs. Pierce, Dr. Kowalski said gently, this is not charity. This is a doctor doing what a doctor should do. It just happens that some of my friends in town have offered to underwrite the difference if any of my Friday morning patients need follow-up care. I am not telling you who those friends are because that is their business. But I am telling you that your granddaughter is going to have everything she needs. Cora looked at her for a long second. All right, she said. When they left the hospital, Wyatt was still in the parking lot. He had a small paper bag in his hand. He held it out to Massey. Doctor said you were brave in there, he said. It brought you something. Massey opened the bag. Inside was a small plush turtle. You said your hoodie had a turtle, Wyatt said. Thought you might want a friend. Massey looked up at him. Her face did something Cora had not seen it do since June. What's his name, Massey said. Whatever you want to name him. Massey thought about it. Wyatt Jr. Massey held the small plush turtle up to her cheek for a long second. She closed her eyes. Then she opened them and looked at Cora, and the look that crossed her face was something Cora had not seen since Sarah was a small girl, which was the particular soft surprise of a child who has just discovered that an adult she barely knew had thought about her by name. She put the turtle into the front pocket of her green hoodie, where its small green head stuck out under her chin, and she did not let go of it for the rest of the day. Cora watched her daughter's mouth and her granddaughter's face. She felt the strange double vision that grandmothers sometimes feel the way a child contains every previous child the family has ever held. She thought with a kind of fierce calm she had not felt in 9 years that whatever else happened in the next 8 weeks of investigations and depositions and federal task forces, this child was going to make it through. Because the world had quietly arranged itself around her in the past 48 hours in a way that did not look like protection from the outside, but was protection all the way down. The man laughed for the first time in 3 days. Cora put her hand on his arm. Sir, she said, thank you for coming. Mrs. Pierce, Wyatt said, your husband once stayed up with my brother in the county lockup the night before his sentencing in 1999. He sat with him for 10 hours so he would not be alone. My brother told me about it. He told me that on his deathbed. I have been waiting 26 years for a chance to repay your family. Today I get a small piece of it. Cora's eyes filled. She did not let them spill. Wyatt nodded once. He turned. He walked back to his bike. He started it. He waited in the parking lot until Cora had Mankey buckled into the Subaru and the engine had started, and then he followed them home to Cedar Hollow Road and did not leave the gravel turnaround until Cora had been inside the house for 10 minutes. When Cora checked the small wooden box she kept her bank statements in that afternoon, she found that her checking account, which had been showing a balance of $1,412 at the bank that morning, now showed a balance of $9,412, and that an electronic deposit dated that morning in the amount of $8,000 even had been labeled in the transaction memo as Emergency Family Support Fund, Iron Crucible, MC, West Virginia. Cora sat down on the kitchen chair that had been hers for 46 years and cried into her open palms for the first time since Earl's funeral. That same Friday afternoon, her landlord came to the front porch and knocked on the screen door. His name was Henry Holden. He was 68 years old. He owned the small house on Cedar Hollow Road and 3 other rentals in town. His wife had been on the senior center board the year Cora had attended the rescue signal presentation. He held his cap in his hands. "Mrs. Pierce," he said, "I heard about your trouble. I am sorry, I am also out here for selfish reasons. Mr. Holden, you do not need to bring up the rent." "I am not bringing up the rent. I am bringing it down." She blinked. "My wife and I talked last night," Henry Holden said. "We have got 4 rentals, and I am 68 years old, and I cannot maintain them all myself anymore. I need a property manager. 20 hours a week, $840 a month. The rent on this house drops to half. You take maintenance calls, you keep the tenant files, you tell me when somebody is 2 months behind. You start Monday if you say yes. Why are you offering me this?" He looked at his cap. "Because Earl Pierce stood with me at my brother's funeral in 1984 when nobody else from the railroad showed up. I never got to say thank you. He is gone now. You are not. This is the closest I can get." Cora put her hand on the screen door. "Mr. Holden," she said, "I accept." Henry Holden stood on the porch with his cap still in his hands. He was a thin twine with deep lines on his forehead and pale blue eyes that had seen most of the deaths in Marlin Springs in the past 40 years because he had also driven the volunteer ambulance from 1978 through 2004. He did not look up at Cora through the screen. "There is one more thing," he said. "Yes, Mr. Holden. My wife wanted me to tell you. She said if you ever need somebody to sit with Masi on an evening when you are tired, she would consider it a favor to be asked. She said she has not had a small child to read a book to in 23 years, and she would consider it a kindness rather than an imposition." Cora did not answer for a moment. "Tell Margaret," she said, "that I will take her up on it on a Tuesday in October when I have a property management training meeting in Lewisburg. I will bring her chicken and dumplings as payment." Henry Holden looked up. He smiled. He nodded once. He put his cap back on. He walked down the gravel walk to his pickup. He drove off without looking back because he was an old enough man to understand that some kindnesses needed to be left on the porch without an audience. Knox Boone found the river property at 147 on Friday afternoon. The deed had been buried inside a shell limited liability company called Greenbrier Bend Holdings, registered in Delaware, whose only listed officer was a paralegal in Charleston, who turned out after another 23 minutes of digging to be Vernon Briggs's college roommate from West Virginia University, class of 2000. 3.4 acres of undeveloped land on the South Fork of the Greenbrier River. Purchase price $71,400 paid cash, August of 2020. The plat showed a long dirt access drive coming off a gravel road that did not appear on most maps. Knox printed 2 copies of the survey. Cold Water laid them on the oak table. He bought a piece of land in the woods 2.5 miles from the nearest house with cash 6 weeks after Travis Lawson aged out of his placement, Coldwater said. He paid cash. He registered it through a shell. He has never built on it. There is no septic permit on file. There is no electric meter pulled. What did he buy it for? Bo said. I do not want to know yet, Coldwater said. But I want to look. They went at 9 that night. 4 of them. Bo on his own bike, Coldwater riding shotgun in Hank Steele's pickup, Wyatt Carver behind them in his own truck with a portable spotlight and a metal detector. Knox stayed at the clubhouse with his laptop watching maps. The dirt road did not appear on the GPS. They found it by milepost off the gravel county road. It had not been maintained. The pickups bottomed out twice on the way in. The air smelled like decaying leaves and river mud. The headlights threw long, stretched shadows through the bare trees. 2.5 miles in the road opened onto a small clearing maybe 40 feet across. There was no structure. There was no power line. There was a fire ring in the center of the clearing made of fieldstones stacked in a tight circle, and behind the fire ring there was a small earthen mound that looked like nothing in particular until Wyatt Carver swung his metal detector across it. The detector hit metal at 18 inches down. It took the 4 of them 93 minutes to dig it out by hand and lantern light. A green plastic waterproof storage container, the kind sold at any hardware store for storing camping gear, secured with a combination lock. Coldwater broke the lock off with a tire iron in his truck. Inside were 3 accordion folders. They opened them on the tailgate of the truck. The first folder contained school photographs, handwritten notes, medical reports, and copies of incident logs for a boy named Demetrius Tatum. Demetrius had been placed with Hopewell from October of 2019 through August of 2020. Half the photographs in the folder were not school photographs. They had been taken at close range in poor light of a child whose face would not be forgotten by anybody who looked at them. The second folder contained the same kind of material for a boy named Joel Mariner. Joel had been placed with Hopewell from January of 2016 through June of 2017. The Joel Mariner folder had a death certificate inside it dated August of 2017, listing cause of death as accidental drowning at a county summer day camp in Webster County. The folder also had a handwritten note in Vernon Briggs' distinctive squared block letters that read in single-line file insurance claim on Monday. For a long moment, none of them moved. The lantern light caught on the death certificate in Wyatt Carver's gloved hand. The boy in the photograph, stapled to the inside of the folder, was 7 years old. He had a gap in his front teeth and a yellow t-shirt with a cartoon character on it that none of them recognized. He had been somebody's child. He had walked into Hopewell Youth Services in January of 2016 with a small duffel bag and the kind of hopeful, uncertain face that small children make when they are being introduced to the next set of strangers. He had been billed to the state of West Virginia for $1,850 a month for 17 months. He had been buried in a county pauper's grave in Webster County the third week of August in 2017. And the man who had written the note to file an insurance claim on Monday had stood at the funeral wearing a dark suit and had told the local minister he was a family friend. Bo Donovan took off his hat. He held it against his chest. He did not speak for 40 seconds. Then he put the hat back on. His mother, Bo said, is she alive? I will find out, Coldwater said. Hank Steele turned away from the truck and walked 3 steps off into the leaves and stood there with his back to them and his shoulders shaking. The third folder contained material on Travis Lawson. There were the same kinds of photographs. There was a copy of Travis's notebook which matched the copy that Loretta Hogan had given them the night before. There was a handwritten log of dates. And at the back of the folder, behind a single sheet of legal paper folded in half, was a life insurance policy issued by Continental Mutual Life of Virginia on the life of Travis Andrew Lawson, beneficiary Vernon Eugene Briggs, with a face value of $127,600, dated effective February the 4th of 2021. 6 weeks before Travis Lawson walked into the Lewisburg DFCS office and asked Loretta Hogan to help him. Coldwater closed the folder. He held it against his chest for a long second. Then he put it carefully into the plastic evidence sleeve he had brought. Bo, he said, yeah, we have to call the FBI tonight. I know it. This is no longer ours. I know it. Bo looked down at the open container in the dirt. 3 folders, 3 boys, one of them dead. He took his hat off. He held it in his hand. Hank Steele was still off in the leaves with his back to them. Joel Mariner, Bo said. Anybody know about him? Mariner, Coldwater said slowly. Mariner. The mother was from Birch River. There was a small write-up in the Pocahontas Times the week after he drowned. I read it. I remember thinking the timing was off. I remember thinking, who lets a foster kid go to summer day camp 2 counties over without a chaperone? Did anybody ever ask? Bo said. No, the mother had been in and out of substance abuse treatment for a decade. The state did not consider her a complainant. No one filed. Bo put his hat back on. We file. At 11:14 that night, a black government sedan with Virginia plates pulled into the gravel lot of the Iron Crucible Clubhouse. 2 occupants. The driver stayed in the car. The passenger walked into the clubhouse without knocking. Special Agent Victoria Carver, FBI Charleston Field Office, Financial Crimes and Public Corruption. 43 years old, lean gray suit, no jewelry. She had been on Vernon Briggs' trail for 4 months and had not closed the loop because she had been building the financial case by the federal rulebook. And the rulebook did not move at the speed life moved at. She walked up to the oak table. She did not sit. She looked at the array of folders on it. Mr. Donovan, she said. Agent Carver, I understand you have been busy. We have been doing what we could. She picked up the Travis Lawson folder. She read the first page of the insurance policy. Her face did not change. Her shoulders did. How long, she said quietly, has your office known about Vernon Briggs? 4 months, she said. She set the folder down. Anonymous tip in May. The audit was triggered in late July. We have been building the financial case. We have been doing it carefully. Carefully, Coldwater said. She turned to him. Mr. Hendricks, with respect, I know what you're about to say. Then I will not say it. Thank you. She looked at Bo. We are going to take this case from here. Mr. Briggs is going to be transferred to federal custody by close of business Monday. I am also going to need a sworn statement from Mrs. Pierce and from Ms. Hogan and from any other parties named in your documentation. I will need a chain of custody letter for everything in those folders. I'm going to be in your face for the next 8 weeks. That works for us, Bo said. One condition, Coldwater said. Agent Carver lifted her eyebrow. You make the second arrest this week, not next month, Coldwater said. Clarence Bishop sits in the same cell block as Vernon Briggs by Friday. Crystal Calloway sits there too. We are not waiting on a federal paperwork timeline to grab the supervisor who buried Travis Lawson's complaint. He has a passport. He has money. He has 9 years of practice in disappearing files. You make that arrest before he hears the news from a court reporter. Agent Carver looked at him for a long second. Mr. Hendricks, she said, we are on the same side. Then we are agreed. We are agreed. She left at 11:48. She took 2 of the folders with her. The third, Travis Lawson's, she let them keep for one more night because she understood that there was one more thing the men in this room needed to do with it before they handed it over. Bo Donovan stood at the table after she had gone. He laid his palms flat on the wood the way Chainsaw had done 5 hours earlier. He breathed once in and out. Coldwater was already on his phone. He had a contact at the West Virginia Division of Motor Vehicles who could pull a current driver's license address on a 22-year-old man named Travis Andrew Lawson if Coldwater asked him by name. The contact called back at 12:06. The address came back to a rental house on Pleasant Avenue in Morgantown, West Virginia, 217 miles north. He works second shift at a transmission shop on Mile Ground Road, the contact said. Gets off at midnight Wednesday through Saturday. Sleeps until noon. You could be there before he wakes up if you left at 4 in the morning. We will leave at 4 in the morning, Coldwater said. He hung up. He looked at Bo. He was 16 years old when she failed him, Coldwater said. He is 22 now. He has spent 5 years thinking nobody listened. He may not open the door. He will open the door, Bo said. How do you know? Bo lifted his left wrist. He pulled the sleeve back 2 inches. The black ink under the cuff read in clean, small script, Hope May, the 2nd, 2001. Because I know what it is to have nobody come for you, he said, and I know what it is to keep the door open just in case anyway. The drive to Morgantown took 4 hours and 11 minutes. Bo drove his own pickup. Coldwater rode passenger. They pulled onto Pleasant Avenue at 8:18 Saturday morning. The house was a small, clapboard rental, painted institutional gray, with a sagging porch and a broken concrete walk, and one window blind that did not match the others. Bo knocked. The man who opened the door was 22 years old, wearing gray sweatpants and a Marshall University t-shirt and 1 sock. In his face when he saw 2 men in leather vests on his porch did something that broke Coldwater's heart, a little because it was the face of a young man who had been waiting for the other shoe to drop for 6.5 years and had decided that morning was as good as any. Travis Lawson, Bo said. Yes, sir. My name is Bo Donovan. This is Cole Hendricks. We have come a long way to talk to you. May we come in? Travis Lawson looked at them for 4 full seconds. His left hand was still on the doorknob. Coldwater noticed that the knuckle of his middle finger was scarred white in a small crescent, the way a knuckle gets scarred when a small boy puts his hand through a window in the arc of a foster placement basement and does not tell anyone in the morning because he has been told that telling is the thing that makes the worst thing happen. Coldwater had seen that scar on his own younger brother's hand once in 1983, and he had spent 43 years afterward not knowing what to do about it. Now in the doorway of a rental house on Pleasant Avenue in Morgantown, looking at the scar on a stranger's hand, Coldwater Cole Hendricks understood for the first time that what to do about it was to come stand on the porch with another brother beside you on a Saturday morning and wait to be invited inside. Are you cops? He said. No, sir. We are friends of a woman named Loretta Hogan. We have come on her behalf. Travis's face changed. Loretta, he said. Yes. He stepped back from the door. Come in. The inside of the rental was clean and almost empty. A futon along one wall, a folding table with 1 chair, a small television. A library copy of a book about heating and air conditioning systems open on the chair. Travis stood in the middle of the room with his arms folded across his chest. 5 years, he said. Yes, Coldwater said. I asked her to help me. She knows. She has been carrying it for 3.5 years. She wants to come forward. Vernon Briggs was arrested Thursday evening. There are other victims. She is going to testify. Travis sat down on the futon, hard. He got arrested. He got arrested, and he is not going to get out. Travis Lawson lowered his head. He did not cry. He did not do anything for a full minute. Then he looked up. There were 2 other boys, he said. I knew their names. I told her their names. Demetrius, and a little one named Joel. Demetrius is alive, Coldwater said. We have not located him yet. We will. Joel Mariner died in August of 2017 at a summer day camp. We have reason to believe Vernon Briggs was the beneficiary of an insurance policy on his life. Travis closed his eyes. I told her, he whispered. I told her about Joel. I know. She knew, and she did nothing. She did nothing for 3.5 years. Then 4 nights ago, she heard about an 8-year-old girl whose grandmother had been threatened by Vernon Briggs at the Pocahontas County Courthouse. And she walked into a Waffle House on Route 219 with the copy of your notebook she had been keeping in a fireproof box in her closet. Bo pulled a single photograph from inside his vest. He held it out. That is the grandmother who made the signal that day, he said, and that is her granddaughter. Travis took the photograph. It was a snapshot Coldwater had taken with his phone the afternoon before of Cora and Macy sitting on the porch swing on Cedar Hollow Road. Macy was holding the small plush turtle. Cora was holding her granddaughter's hand. Travis Lawson looked at the photograph for a long time. She is 8, Bo said quietly. Yes, she is the same age as one of the children whose folder we found buried at his river property Friday night. His river property. He had a clearing on the Greenbrier with photographs of 3 children buried in a plastic box. Travis closed his eyes. The single tear ran. He wiped it with the back of his hand. Mr. Donovan, he said, I have spent 5 years convinced that nothing I said would matter. I have not told a soul. I have a bum. I take a class at night at the community college. I do not date. I do not drink. I do my dishes. I have built one small, careful, safe life, and I have been waiting for it to fall apart because every life I had before this one fell apart. He looked up. If I come back to Marlin Springs and tell what happened to me, will that little girl be safer? Yes, Bo said. She will. All right, then. Travis Lawson stood up. Give me 20 minutes to pack a bag, he said. He came back to Marlin Springs in the passenger seat of Bo Donovan's pickup with Coldwater in the back seat. They got into town at 3:12 Saturday afternoon. Travis stayed at the clubhouse that night and the next 2 nights in the guest room above the bay with Chainsaw Jeb Armstrong taking the shift at the door. Travis met with FBI agent Carver Sunday morning for 3 hours. He met with Detective May Riggs Sunday afternoon for 2 more. On Monday morning at 11:20, federal agents and Pocahontas County deputies served a warrant at a 4-bedroom brick house on Hickory Lane in Lewisburg, West Virginia. The owner of the house, Clarence Bishop, 64 years old, retired DFCS regional supervisor, was placed under arrest on charges of obstruction of justice conspiracy to defraud a federal program and aiding and abetting child endangerment. At 12:08 the same day, federal agents and deputies served a warrant at a townhouse in South Charleston, West Virginia. The owner of the townhouse, Crystal Calloway, 41 years old, current administrative assistant at Hopewell Youth Services and former DFCS deputy regional supervisor, was placed under arrest on the same charges. By 2 in the afternoon, all 3 of them, Vernon Briggs, Clarence Bishop, and Crystal Calloway, were in the same federal detention facility outside Beckley. Cora Pierce did not know any of this in real time. She was at the records office Tuesday morning at 8:30, as she always was processing the weekly mail intake. The records office had been moved temporarily down the hall, while the second-floor office where Vernon Briggs had cornered her on Thursday was sealed by the FBI for evidence collection. At 11:14, Hester Lambert, the clerk of court, brought Cora a cup of coffee from the break room and set it on the corner of her desk. She did not say anything. Cora looked up at her. It is over for him, Hester said. I know. You did a thing. I do not feel like I did. Hester sat down in the chair on the other side of the desk. She picked up the second cup of coffee she had brought for herself. Cora, she said, I have worked at this courthouse for 34 years. I have watched a lot of paperwork pass through this office. I have watched a lot of things that should have been caused get missed. I have watched a lot of women like you walk down the front steps at 5:30 and go home and never tell anybody what they had carried out of here in their head. She took a sip. You walked down those steps on Thursday and you raised your hand. Cora looked at her coffee. I almost did not, but you did. That is the part that matters. That is the part that will matter for the rest of your life. You raised your hand. Somebody saw it. The rest of us are going to have to live with the days we did not. She stood. She set the cup down on the corner of Cora's desk. That is all I came in here to say. She walked out. Cora stood at the window of the temporary records office for a long minute. She looked down at the limestone landing of the south entrance 3 stories below, where she had stood on Thursday, and raised her left hand to an empty square. The wind was moving the flag over the courthouse roof. A boy on a bicycle was crossing the crosswalk. The same woman from the dry cleaners was walking back across the square with somebody else's plastic-wrapped suits in her arms. Cora pressed her right hand flat against the cool window glass. She did not make the signal again. She did not need to. She understood with the kind of slow, late-afternoon clarity that comes to people who have been quietly brave their whole lives, that what had happened on the steps below was not the end of the story. It was the part where the story finally got let out of the box where it had been waiting. The rest of it was going to be different now. The week after the arrest, Cora Pierce slept the way somebody who has not slept properly in 23 weeks finally sleeps. Hard, late, without dreams. She woke on the first Saturday after that Thursday and lay in bed listening to the morning birds outside the kitchen window for 10 full minutes before she got up. The sound of birds had been there the whole time. She just had not been able to hear them with her shoulders pulled up around her ears. Macy slept later too. She slept until 8:20 on Saturday morning, which was unprecedented in her short life. And when Cora went to wake her, she found the plush turtle named Wyatt Jr. tucked under Macy's arm and a faint half-smile on her sleeping face. Things did not magically become easy. The first 3 weeks were hard. Macy woke up twice on a Tuesday night, crying about a dream she could not describe. The therapist, Dr. Kowalski, had referred them to a woman named Annette Gallagher, who had been practicing in Lewisburg for 16 years, sat with Macy for 45 minutes once a week with crayons and paper and a sand tray full of small wooden figures, and never asked her to describe anything she did not want to describe. Cora went to therapy too. Annette Gallagher had a colleague named Doreen Vaughn who specialized in older women and worked out of a small office above the pharmacy in Marlin Springs. Cora had walked into Doreen's office for the first time on the second Monday after Vernon Briggs's arrest with her purse held in her lap and a list of 3 things she would not be discussing folded into the front pocket. By the 4th session, she had unfolded the list. By the 6th, she had thrown it away. The list had contained 3 items. The first item was a sentence she had told herself for 9 years, which was that she had no right to be tired because there were people who had it harder. The second item was the morning she had found Sarah, which she had narrated only twice in her life, both times to Earl's framed photograph on the mantel after Earl had been gone for a year, and neither time out loud. The third item was the precise feeling in her chest of standing on the courthouse landing and lifting her hand and watching the empty crosswalk and feeling certain for 1 full second that nobody was going to come. She did not bring the list out in order. She brought item 3 out first in the second session because it was the freshest. She brought item 1 out in the third session because she had been carrying it the longest and it had become the heaviest. She brought item 2 out in the 5th session on a Monday afternoon in November with a thin rain hitting the second-story window above the pharmacy. She did not cry while she told it. Doreen Vaughn did not interrupt. When Cora was finished, she sat in the chair for a long moment looking at her own hands, and then she said, I have been carrying that for 5 years and 4 months, and I think I would like to set it down now, if that is all right. And Doreen Vaughn had said, Of course, Cora, it is all right. The brothers of the Iron Crucible Marlin Springs chapter did not crowd. They did not call. They did not show up uninvited. They did, however, do small, specific things that became visible only when Cora looked back at them later. The taillight on the Subaru, which had been out for 9 months and which Cora had been planning to fix herself in the spring, was replaced by Wyatt Carver one Saturday afternoon while Cora was at the grocery store. Knox Boone showed up on a Sunday morning with a printer and a wireless router and set up Cora's spare bedroom as a small home office because she was going to need to do property management paperwork for Henry Holden. And Cora's old laptop had been running on the wrong side of working since 2019. Hank Steele drove past the cabin twice a week on his heating oil route just to lay eyes on the gravel turnaround and check that nothing looked off. Chainsaw Jeb Armstrong, who lived 4 miles further out on the same county road, made it his quiet business to drive past at 6 o'clock every evening for the first month and look up the hollow toward the cabin from his pickup and continue on if everything was as it should be. Bo Donovan called once a week on Sunday afternoons. He never stayed on the phone for more than 5 minutes. He always asked how Massey was sleeping. He always offered to come by if Cora needed something. He never came by unless she asked. The first time Cora asked was the third week. Her wood stove had developed a hairline crack in the rear plate. She called Bo on a Thursday evening. He came at 7 the next morning with a new plate and a length of stove cement and a quart of paint, and he replaced the plate in 2 hours and did not stay for the coffee Cora offered. Because he was an old enough man to understand that pride and care could coexist in the same kitchen, but that the balance of them shifted with every minute he was inside. He stood in the doorway with his hand on the screen door before he left. "Mrs. Pierce," he said. "Cora," she said. He smiled. It was a small thing. He nodded. "Cora, the chapter is putting together a little something for the Senior Center Fall fundraiser. They have asked me to speak. I would rather not. Would you consider it?" "Me?" "Yes, ma'am. I am not a public speaker, Mr. Donovan." "Bo? Bo, you are not. Neither am I. But there are 70 people on the Senior Center fundraiser list. About 40 of them are old enough to remember Earl. About 30 of them have grandchildren who go to the community center. And nobody at that fundraiser is going to know what the hand sign means unless somebody who used it tells them." Cora looked at her kitchen table. "All right," she said. The Senior Center Fall fundraiser was held in the Marlin Springs Community Center Gymnasium on the second Saturday of October. 68 people came. The Senior Center director, a small, loud woman named Pansy Donovan, who was no relation to Bo and who had reminded him of this fact at least once a month for 12 years, made a brief introduction. She did not mention the courthouse incident by name. She simply said that her old friend Cora Pierce had something important to share, and would they please give her their attention. Cora walked to the podium in a navy blue dress she had not worn since Earl's funeral. She had had her hair done that morning at the salon next to the pharmacy. Macy sat in the second row holding Wyatt Jr. Henry Holden and his wife sat behind her. Hester Lambert sat 1 row over. Dr. Kowalski sat 3 rows back next to Doreen Vaughn. The men of the Iron Crucible Marlin Springs, chapter all, 23 of them, stood in a loose line along the back wall of the gymnasium with their vests off and their arms folded because a uniformed presence at a senior center fundraiser had seemed like the wrong choice. Bo stood in the middle of them. Cora gripped the podium. "My name is Cora Pierce," she said. "I am 71 years old. I have lived in Pocahontas County for 46 years. Her voice carried better than she had expected. 5 weeks ago, a man came into the records office at the courthouse where I work and threatened my granddaughter. I am not going to tell you everything he said. I am going to tell you what I did about it." She held the podium with both hands. "I walked out of that office. I went down the limestone steps at the south entrance of the courthouse. I stood on the landing in the wind. I raised my hand. I made a sign that some of you may have seen before." She let go of the podium with her left hand. She lifted it, palm out, thumb tucked, 4 fingers folded over. "That is the sign. That is all of it. You hold it for 3 seconds. You do not speak. You do not call attention. You just hold it where somebody can see you." She lowered her hand. "I made that sign 3 times that afternoon. The first 2 times nobody saw it. The third time a man named Bo Donovan was coming down the courthouse stairs and he saw it and he did not walk past." Her eyes found Bo in the back of the room. He did not move. He did not nod. He just held her gaze for the 2 seconds she needed. "I want to tell you what it means to be seen by one person who refuses to walk past." Her voice did not break, but her hands did. She gripped the podium again. "My husband Earl died 9 years ago. My daughter Sarah died 5 years ago. I have been raising my granddaughter Massey on my own with a part-time courthouse job and a small pension in the cabin on Cedar Hollow my husband and I bought in 1978. I am not a person who asks for help. I am a person who works around things." She paused. "On the afternoon a man threatened my granddaughter. I had to ask for help. I did not have any other choice. And the help I asked for was silent. It was a hand on a courthouse landing. It was the smallest possible thing I could do, and it was the hardest possible thing I could do, and it was enough." She looked out at the gymnasium. "I am here today because I want every person in this room over the age of 70 to know that sign. And I want every person in this room over the age of 7 to know that sign. Because there is going to come a day in some Walmart parking lot, or in some doctor's office, or in some hallway where you cannot speak out loud when you will need it, or when somebody you love will need it. And the difference between a hand that gets seen and a hand that gets walked past is a person standing nearby who took the trouble to learn it." She held up her hand again. "The whole room looked. Palm out, thumb tucked into your palm, 4 fingers folded over the thumb, 3 seconds. That is it." Around the gymnasium, 68 people began practicing the gesture. Some of them had to be helped by the person next to them. Mossy held Wyatt Jr. up by the front paws and made the turtle do the sign with one of its small green flippers, and at least 4 people in the row in front of her saw it and laughed for a moment, and then they did not laugh anymore. "Teach it to your grandchildren," Cora said. "Teach it to your daughters. Teach it to your sons. Teach it to the man at the gas pump if he has time. Because if somebody had taught it to one more person in Marlin Springs 5 weeks ago, my granddaughter might not have been in the danger she was in. And if Bo Donovan had not been one of the few people who already knew it, I might be telling you a different story right now." She stopped. She looked at Bo again. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you to a man I had never met before in my life who knew what a hand on a courthouse landing meant. Thank you to the brothers of the Iron Crucible who stood between my granddaughter and that man's car. Thank you to a doctor who did not charge me for an exam. Thank you to a landlord who lowered my rent. Thank you to a clerk of court who told me on a Tuesday morning that I had done a thing. And thank you to the women at this senior center who taught me the sign in November of last year and gave me apple cake afterward." A small ripple of laughter ran through the audience. "That is all I have to say," Cora finished. "Will you teach somebody this week?" The gymnasium stood and applauded for 4.5 minutes. Cora did not know what to do with her hands during the applause. She gripped the podium until the clapping slowed. Then she stepped off the small stage and walked back to her seat next to Masi, and Maki put both of her small arms around Cora's waist and pressed her face into her side, and Cora put her hand on the back of her granddaughter's head and did not move. The trial began the following May. It took 3 weeks. Vernon Briggs's federal defender attempted to argue that his client had been the victim of a vigilante action by a motorcycle club and that the evidence chain had been hopelessly compromised. The federal prosecutor entered Loretta Hogan's contemporaneous copy of Travis Lawson's notebook into the record. The federal prosecutor entered the buried life insurance policy on Travis Lawson, dated 6 weeks before Travis's complaint had been filed. The federal prosecutor entered the buried life insurance policy on Joel Mariner, the foster child who had drowned at a summer day camp in Webster County in August of 2017, for a face value of $94,000. The federal prosecutor entered the bank records showing 9 years of monthly transfers from Hopewell Youth Services to Vernon Briggs's personal checking account. The federal prosecutor entered the photographs of Demetrius Tatum, who had been located in Charlottesville and who was now 23 and who had testified for 1 hour and 7 minutes on the second Tuesday of the second week and had walked out of the courtroom afterward and into the arms of his older sister, who had not seen him in 5 years. Travis Lawson testified on the 4th day of the 3rd week. His testimony lasted 93 minutes. The jury did not look away. Travis did not look away from the jury. The defense attorney did not cross-examine Travis Lawson. He had been told before the trial began by a federal prosecutor who knew the score that the jury would not forgive him for it. He let Travis Lawson step down from the stand and walk back to his seat in the gallery, and Travis sat down next to Cora Pierce. And Cora did not look at him for 1 full minute because she did not want to make the moment about herself. Then she put her hand on his forearm and squeezed it once. And Travis Lawson put his hand over hers and kept it there for the rest of the afternoon's testimony. Cole Hendricks watched the two of them from the 3rd row behind the prosecution table. He had been a detective for 23 years and a sergeant at arms for 5, and he had seen many courtrooms and many witnesses and many wrongs that the courtroom could only partially mend. But he had not often seen the small, still moment in which a young man who had not been heard in 6.5 years discovered that an older woman he had never met before could put her hand on his arm with the steady weight of a person who had decided to believe him. He thought with the unsentimental clarity that came from his years on the job that this was the part of the work that the patches on his vest did not say anything about, but the part that the founding chair of the chapter, dead now 11 years, had always told the new patches to look for because it was the part that proved the work was working. Cora Pierce testified on the third day of the second week. She wore the navy blue dress. Her testimony lasted 47 minutes. She did not cry. She did not break. She described the manila folder in the 3 photographs, and the conversation in the records office, and the limestone landing, and the 3 repetitions of the hand sign. And she described them in the slow, precise voice of a woman who had practiced telling the truth for 68 years before she had needed to use it under oath. The jury was out for 2 hours and 45 minutes. Vernon Briggs was convicted on all 17 federal and state counts. He was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison with no eligibility for early release. Clarence Bishop accepted a plea agreement on charges of obstruction of justice and conspiracy and was sentenced to 6 years. Crystal Calloway accepted a plea agreement on the same charges and was sentenced to 4 years. Roy Slade, the bookkeeper, was charged with aiding and abetting wire fraud and pleaded out for 18 months and his accountancy license. Loretta Hogan testified at all 3 sentencing hearings. Federal prosecutors filed a motion of substantial cooperation on her behalf. She received 12 months of probation, a fine of $7,500, and the surrender of her DFCS pension going forward. Her state retirement benefits, which had been earned before her promotion to the supervisor role, were preserved. Her husband's dialysis continued. She walked out of the federal courthouse in Beckley on the day of her sentencing with Cora Pierce at her right elbow because Cora had driven the 2 hours to be there and had not told anybody she was coming. Loretta, Cora had said in the courthouse parking lot, "Cora, you should not have done what you did 3.5 years ago. You should have known better." "I should have." "You did better last September. That counts. It does not erase, but it counts." Loretta Hogan looked at her. "Thank you for being the woman who showed up to tell me that," she said. "I did not know I needed it." "I did." They went to a diner across the street and split a piece of coconut cream pie. They did not become friends. They became something more useful than that. Two women who had carried different versions of the same impossible weight in their handbags for years and had finally set both versions down on the same diner table. They sat for 90 minutes. The waitress refilled their coffee 3 times without being asked. Loretta told Cora about her husband's dialysis schedule, about her grandchildren's grades, about the dog her son had brought home from the shelter the year before. Cora told Loretta about Macy's 3rd-grade teacher, about the new property management software Knox Boone had installed on her home computer, about the way the dogwood at the corner of the cabin yard had bloomed twice that spring because of an unusual warm February. They did not talk about Vernon Briggs. They did not talk about Travis Lawson. They did not talk about the folder in the fireproof box. They had spent 47 minutes in the federal courthouse already that morning talking about all of those things. And the diner across the street was for the kinds of things diners are for, which are coffee and pie and the small, slow news of a small, slow life. At the end, Loretta paid for the pie because she insisted. Cora left the tip. They walked out into the parking lot together. Loretta's son was waiting in the car to drive her home. Cora hugged Loretta once briefly on the asphalt under the pale October sky, the way 2 old Methodist women hug each other with the practiced restraint that is a kind of permanent affection. "Take care of your husband," Cora said. "Take care of your granddaughter." "I will." "I know it." The Pierce Project began that fall. It started with 1 presentation a month at the Senior Center. By the end of the first year, it was running at the community center, the volunteer fire stations, the Methodist church, the Baptist church, the small Pentecostal congregation that met in a metal building on County Route 6 and the elementary school assembly hall. The materials had been printed at cost by the print shop in Lewisburg. Wyatt Carver had laminated 300 wallet-sized cards with the rescue signal printed on one side and a phone number for the Pocahontas County Sheriff's Office on the other. Knox Boone had built a small website with a single page on it. Hank Steele had connected Cora with the West Virginia School Counselors Association. By the end of the second year, the Pierce Project had been written into the state's required personal safety curriculum for grades 3 through 5. By the end of the third year, it had spread to 2 adjoining states. Cora kept her courthouse job. She did not need to. She could have lived comfortably on Henry Holden's property management salary on the small annuity that had been quietly set up in Mossie's name by an anonymous donor whose check had been written from an account at the State Bank of Pocahontas with a memo line that read, "For the granddaughter on Cora's Social Security and on the speaking fees she had started turning down because she did not feel comfortable taking money for telling the truth." She kept the courthouse job because she liked the work and because she liked the limestone landing and because she had earned the right to stand on it. 2 years and 4 months after the trial, on a Thursday afternoon in early March, Mossie Pierce was 10 years old in 5th grade and standing in the hallway outside the 3rd grade classroom at Marlin Springs Elementary School. She was carrying a small backpack with a plush turtle attached to the zipper by a length of green ribbon. She had been asked by her teacher to come to the 3rd grade classroom for a special after-lunch presentation, and she had said yes. The 3rd grade teacher, a young woman named Miss Tanner, who was 26 years old and in her 2nd year of teaching, introduced Mossie to the class. "This is Mossie Pierce," Miss Tanner said. "She is in 5th grade. She is going to teach you a hand sign that you might need to know someday. Her grandmother, Mrs. Cora Pierce, invented the program that taught your parents this sign, and Macy is going to be your peer educator for the next 20 minutes. Mossie stood at the front of the classroom. She looked at the 22 8-year-olds sitting at their desks. She was not nervous. She had given this presentation 11 times since November, starting at her own 5th grade class and working through the 4th grade and now into the 3rd. "Hi," she said. "My name is Mossie. When I was 8, a man tried to take me away from the community center. My grandma made a hand sign that saved me. I am going to teach it to you." She raised her hand, palm out, thumb tucked, 4 fingers folded over. "Like this, 3 seconds. You hold it where somebody can see you." The 22 3rd graders looked at her with the open attention of children being told something they instinctively understood to be important. In the back of the room, a small girl with brown braids and a pink sweatshirt raised her hand. "Yes," Mossie said. "What if nobody sees you?" the small girl said. "Then you make it again," Mackey said. 3 times, 5 times. You keep making it until somebody sees you. "What if nobody sees you all those times either?" Macy thought about it. "Then somebody might see it later after it is too late," she said. "And they will spend their life looking for the person they did not see, and they will help the next person. That is what my friend Mr. Donovan did. He did not see somebody once, so now he sees everybody." The small girl in the back of the room considered this with the solemn focus that small children bring to the only questions that actually matter. Then she nodded. Then she raised her own hand, palm out, thumb, tucked 4 fingers folded over, and she practiced it for 3 full seconds. And at her desk, 3 rows up. Another little girl saw her do it and copied it. And around the 3rd grade classroom of Marlin Springs Elementary School, 22 small hands rose and held a sign that some of them would never use, and that 1 or 2 of them might be saved by. Mossie Pierce watched them. She had grown 4 inches since the previous September. Her hair was longer. Her face was still her grandmother's face, except in the lower jaw where it was her mother Sarah's face, which Cora had not been able to look at directly for the first 3 years, and which now Cora could look at and smile. "That is the sign," Mossie said. "Now I am going to tell you the rest of the rules." She spent the next 18 minutes telling them the rest of the rules. The rules about strangers. The rules about people who knew your name and your routine and your address. The rules about the people who looked the most like helpers, who were sometimes the people you had to be the most careful about. The rules about always telling your grandma even if she was tired. The rules about always telling your teacher even if she looked busy. She did not tell them the part about her own afternoon at the community center 4 Thursdays in a row when she had felt the wrong feeling and had not been able to make her grandmother listen. She did not tell them about the photograph of the brick wall she had been sitting on. She did not tell them about the conference room or the green hoodie or the way her grandmother's hands had felt the first time they had wrapped around her again. She kept those parts for herself. Some parts of a story belong to the person who carried them out. The teacher in the 3rd grade classroom did not ask. Children of that age sometimes have to be allowed to keep the heaviest part of a thing for themselves until they are ready to set it down. When Mossie finished, the 3rd grade teacher hugged her in the hallway. Macy walked back to her own classroom carrying a small drawing one of the children had made for her on the way out. A pink piece of construction paper, a green turtle in crayon, a name in the corner, Megan, age 8, a small heart over the M. Macy folded the drawing in half. She put it carefully into the front pocket of her backpack, the same pocket where she kept the laminated school photograph of herself in second grade that Cora had wanted to throw away when Maggie had outgrown her front teeth, but which Macy had insisted on keeping because the dress in the photograph had been her favorite green. She walked back into her fifth grade classroom. That afternoon, Macy walked home from school with the green ribbon on her backpack, catching the early March sun. She walked the same 4 blocks she had walked at 8 years old to the community center, except this time the community center was closed for the day, and she walked past it without slowing, because nothing was waiting for her there anymore. That needed to wait. She walked up Mill Street to the corner of Spring and turned left, and she walked the 3 blocks to where Cora was waiting in the Subaru with the engine running, because Cora picked Macy up from the elementary school every Thursday at 3:15 and had done so since September of the year of the courthouse. Macy got in the front seat. She handed Cora the pink construction paper drawing with the green turtle on it. Cora looked at the drawing for a long second. She read the name in the corner. She read the small heart. She handed it back. Megan, age 8, she said. Yes, ma'am. She is going to remember it. I know she is. Cora put the Subaru in drive. They went home together to Cedar Hollow Road, and Macy put the drawing on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a chicken that Cora had bought in 1991. And they ate macaroni and cheese for dinner, and Macy did her homework at the kitchen table while Cora paid Henry Holden's monthly invoices. And the small daily life of the cabin on Cedar Hollow Road continued because the small daily life was what they had been protecting all along, and they had not lost it. On the front steps of the cabin on Cedar Hollow Road on a Sunday morning in late April of the 3rd year after the courthouse, Bo Donovan sat on the porch swing next to Cora Pierce with a coffee mug in his hand and a folder in his lap. The wind was warm. The mountain laurel along the gravel turnaround was beginning to bud out. Macy was inside the cabin doing homework. Bo set his coffee down on the porch rail. Cora, he said. Bo, I have been thinking about something. All right? He opened the folder. Inside was a single piece of paper. This is a deed, he said. It is for a 4-acre parcel of land on Possum Hollow Road. It is 2 miles north of the clubhouse. There is no structure on it. It has a clear spring. It backs onto National Forest. The state surveyed it last year. Cora looked at the piece of paper without picking it up. It is in trust for Macy, Bo said. The trust runs until her 25th birthday. After that, she owns it outright. She can build a cabin on it. She can sell it. She can plant a hayfield. She can leave it alone forever. Cora put her coffee down. Bo, I bought it 3 weeks ago, he said. I have been thinking about it for 2 years. I did not want to do it until I was sure it would not feel to you like payment. I am sure now. Bo, he looked at her. Hope would be 23 this year, he said. She was 7 when she died. I was in Iraq. She was placed with a foster family in Knoxville while my wife went through chemotherapy. My wife came through the chemotherapy. We tried to get Hope back home. The placement coordinator said there was a paperwork issue. She told us to wait. We waited. Then there was an accident at the placement, a fall down a set of basement stairs. The placement coordinator told us there had been no signs of anything wrong. The state investigated. The investigation closed without findings. The placement coordinator's name was not in any of the documents. He paused. I have spent the last 17 years looking for that name. I have not found it. I am not going to. Some things you do not get to finish. He turned the folder so the deed faced her. Your granddaughter is alive, he said. She made the sign. You raised her hand. I came down the steps. That is what I have been carrying around for 17 years. The chance to come down the steps for somebody. Cora, this land does not bring my daughter back. It does not bring your husband back. It does not bring your Sarah back. It is just 4 acres on Possum Hollow Road that I would like Macy to have when she is 25, because she is the proof that something inside me that I thought had died is still alive. Cora picked up the deed. She held it in both hands. Bo Donovan, she said quietly, you are a strange and stubborn man. Yes, ma'am. I am going to accept this. Yes, ma'am. I am also going to make you sit at my kitchen table for dinner once a month for the rest of your life. Yes, ma'am. Starting next Sunday. Yes, ma'am. He stood up. He put his coffee mug on the railing. He walked to the screen door. He turned back. Cora. Yes. Hope's middle name was May. We did not know what to call her for 2 days after she was born. Then my wife looked at her in the hospital bassinet and said, "Look at her, she is just a Hope." So that was that. The middle name came from my wife's grandmother. Cora nodded. Mossie's middle name is Hope, she said. Her mother Sarah picked it from a Bible verse. Her grandfather Earl said it sounded like a song. Bo Donovan did not say anything. He nodded once. He pushed the screen door open. He walked out to his bike at the end of the gravel turnaround. He swung a leg over. He started the engine. The sound was low and steady and familiar. Cora sat on the porch swing for a long time after he was gone. The deed was on the seat beside her. Wyatt Jr. the turtle, who was now slightly worn around the head from being slept with for 2 years, sat between her and the deed. The April wind moved the new green leaves on the dogwood at the corner of the yard. She lifted her left hand, palm out, thumb tucked, 4 fingers folded over. She held it for 3 seconds alone with nobody to see it because the gesture had become for her a private daily reminder of something she had once been afraid she had lost. Not safety exactly, not even courage. The simple, stubborn fact that one quiet woman in a gray cardigan could lift her hand on a limestone landing and bring 23 motorcycles in the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation and a doctor's free appointment and a landlord's rent reduction and a young man named Travis Lawson's day in court and a small girl named Mossie Pierce's quiet bedroom on Cedar Hollow Road into existence with 3 seconds of refusing to stay silent. She lowered her hand. She picked up the deed. She walked into the cabin to show Mossie. 3 years and 7 months after the day on the courthouse steps, Bo Donovan stood at the back of a high school gymnasium in Williamson, West Virginia, on a Tuesday evening in November, and watched Cora Pierce, age 75, give the 487th public presentation of the Pierce Project. She had cut her hair short 2 years before. She wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck, the way Loretta Hogan had once worn hers. She held a small wireless microphone in her right hand and a stack of laminated wallet cards in her left. She told the story the same way she always told it. The records office, the folder, the photographs, the limestone landing, the 3 repetitions of the hand sign, the man in the leather vest who had not walked past. She always said his name, Bo Donovan. She did not turn to acknowledge him at the back of the room because he had asked her in the first year of the project not to single him out from the audience because the story was not about him. He stood in the shadows at the rear of the gymnasium and let her tell it. When she came to the end, when she lifted her hand and showed 400 parents and grandparents and high school students the sign one more time, when the gymnasium stood and applauded, Bo slipped out the back door. He walked to his bike in the parking lot. He sat on it for a long minute before he started the engine. He looked at his left wrist in the gas station light. Hope May, the 2nd, 2001. He had gotten the tattoo 3 weeks after Hope's funeral in a small shop on a back street in Knoxville from an artist named Lemuel, who had asked him only one question, which was, "Do you want the date or do you want the year?" And Bo had said the date, and Lemuel had said, "That is the right answer. That is what people who actually love them get." Bo had taken his wife to see the tattoo when it was healed. His wife, who had since divorced him and moved to North Carolina and remarried a chiropractor, had looked at the small black ink on his wrist for a long second and had said, "Bo, that is the kindest thing anybody has ever done for our daughter." And Bo had said nothing because he had not known how to say that the kindness in question had been mostly for himself because Hope was past needing anything. And the tattoo was a reminder posted to his own forearm that there had once been a small girl in the world who had needed her father to come home before she fell, and her father had not come home in time. He had stopped expecting forgiveness for that. He had decided somewhere in the years after the divorce and before the patch that forgiveness was not something he was going to receive because the person who could have given it to him was 7 years old and was no longer present, and any other forgiveness he tried to claim would be a forgery. He had decided instead to come down the steps every time he saw a hand go up. That was not absolution. That was the work. He pulled out his phone. He scrolled to the folder he had been keeping for 19 years. Inside, at the bottom, beneath case files and photographs and old emails and the case number that had never gone anywhere, and the names of 3 foster coordinators whom he had been quietly tracking for 17 years, He tapped to add a new entry. He typed 5 words. 487. He saved it. He closed the folder. He pocketed the phone. He started the bike. He rolled out of the high school parking lot onto the state route. The November cold was already starting. He had a long ride home. He thought on the ride back about a sentence Loretta Hogan had said to him on a Thursday night in a Waffle House on Route 219 4 years earlier. She had said the time was always right. I just was not. He thought about Cora Pierce on the limestone landing. He thought about a small girl in a green hoodie running across an annex conference room into her grandmother's arms. He thought about his daughter Hope. He thought about her and the way he had finally learned to think about her after 17 years of carrying her like a bone in his chest. Not as a wound, as a place where his attention was sharpened, as a reason to come down the steps. He had not stopped looking for the person who had hurt Hope. He probably never would. But he had stopped expecting to find her. He had stopped letting that be the measure of whether his life had counted. The measure of whether his life had counted, he had decided somewhere in the last 3 years between a cabin on Cedar Hollow Road and a clubhouse on Possum Hollow Road, and the 487th time he had heard Cora Pierce say his name from a podium was whether he was still coming down the steps when somebody raised a hand. He rode home through the cold under a high November moon. The road was clean. The sound of the engine was steady. He passed the exit for Marlin Springs at 12:41. He did not stop. He turned up Possum Hollow Road. He pulled into the gravel lot of the clubhouse. The lights were off. The night was quiet. He cut the engine. He sat on the bike for a moment. He took off his helmet. He went inside. This story has not been about motorcycles. It has not been about a courthouse landing. It has not been about a foster care coordinator who was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison for 9 years of stealing from children who had nothing. It has been about the moment a woman in a gray cardigan decided that her granddaughter was worth lifting her hand for, and the moment a man in a leather vest decided that her hand was worth coming down the steps for, and the moment a young man named Travis Lawson decided that the door of a rental house on Pleasant Avenue in Morgantown was worth opening when 2 strangers knocked on it. And the moment a retired DFCS supervisor named Loretta Hogan decided that the folder in her bedroom closet was worth carrying into a Waffle House on Route 219. It has been about the math that being seen and being saved are not the same thing, but that one is often the entire prerequisite for the other. It has been about the math that the scariest looking person in a public square can sometimes be the only person in it who has been trained to recognize the smallest gesture of human need. It has been about the math that one quiet woman who has spent 46 years not asking for help can ask for it in a single second when the stakes become high enough, and that the rest of the world will catch up to her if anybody at all knows what they are looking at. Cora Pierce kept the cabin on Cedar Hollow Road. She kept her job at the records office. She kept her seat on the porch swing. She kept her granddaughter. Macy graduated from Marlin Springs Elementary School in 2028, from the middle school in 2031, and started Pocahontas County High School the same fall. She wore a green ribbon in her hair on the first day. The plush turtle named Wyatt Jr. sat on the dresser in her bedroom, slightly worn, slightly faded, watching the morning sun come through the curtains. Travis Lawson finished his community college degree in heating and air conditioning systems and moved back to West Virginia in 2026. He took a job with a small contractor in Lewisburg. He volunteered at the Pierce Project. He drove Cora to one of her presentations every other month. He stood at the back of the room while she gave it. He had been doing this for 6 years before he gave his first presentation of his own on a Wednesday evening at the Lewisburg Public Library. To an audience of 42, he told the story of a boy who had walked to a DFCS office at 16 years old and asked for help. He told the story of a woman who had buried his complaint for 3.5 years and then had walked into a Waffle House at 64 to set it down. He told the story without anger. He told it because somebody had to. Loretta Hogan died of pneumonia in 2028 at age 75. The Pierce Project held a small memorial at the Senior Center in Marlin Springs. Cora gave the eulogy. She did not pretend Loretta had been a saint. She did not pretend Loretta had been a villain. She said Loretta had been a woman who had finally been brave when bravery had cost her almost everything, and that this kind of bravery was the only kind worth talking about because the easy kind was just inclination. The Iron Crucible Motorcycle Club, Harlem. Springs chapter rode at Loretta Hogan's graveside. There were 31 of them that day. The chapter had grown over the years. They stood in a loose semicircle at the back of the cemetery, in their vests, helmets in their hands, while the small Methodist congregation buried a woman who had once made the wrong choice and then had spent the rest of her life trying to make it right. Bo Donovan did not ride at the graveside. He stood next to Cora. He had retired from chapter leadership the previous spring. He was 63 now. His knees did not bend the way they used to. He still sat the seat. He still came down the steps. But he had passed the gavel to Coldwater Cole Hendricks, who had passed his deputy spot to Knox Boone, who had stopped going by Kettledrum and was now just Knox, and the chapter rolled on. Cora Pierce stood at the back of the cemetery in a black dress and a small black hat with her hand resting on Bo Donovan's elbow. The wind was thin. The November sun was pale. The Methodist preacher said his words. The pallbearers, who included Travis Lawson and Hank Steele, and one of Loretta's grown sons, who had flown in from North Carolina, did their work. The Methodist preacher, who was 61 years old and had been at the church for 9 years and had not known Loretta well, read from the 8th chapter of Romans because Loretta's husband had told him that morning that it was Loretta's favorite. The verses were the ones about how nothing in all creation could separate a person from the love that held them, and the preacher read the verses slowly, and the small congregation, which numbered 74 people on a cold Tuesday morning in late November, listened to him read, and some of them mouthed the words along with him because they had been mouthing those words at funerals their whole lives. Cora did not mouth the words. She thought instead about the first time she had heard them, which had been at Earl's funeral 9 years before, and the way the deputy at the back of the church had also been mouthing the words, and the way she had thought at the time that she would not survive that afternoon, and the way she had survived it, and the way she had survived every afternoon since, and the way she was going to survive the afternoon of her own funeral one day, which she would not be present for in the ordinary sense, but which she had decided sitting in the back of the Methodist church watching Loretta Hogan's casket be carried out, would also include the 8th chapter of Romans, because she liked the part about how nothing could separate. And she liked the idea that on the afternoon of her own funeral, a small girl named Massey, who would by then be a grown woman, would hear those words read out for her grandmother and would understand that nothing had been able to separate them. Not the courthouse, not the manila folder, not the man in the polo shirt, not the long years between, and that the love that had held them all the way through. When the service was over, Cora let go of Bo's elbow. She walked alone to the casket. She laid her palm on the polished wood for 3 full seconds. She did not lift the hand into the sign. The sign was for the living. This was for the woman who had finally come into the diner late and who had still made it to the table while there was food left on it. Then she turned. She walked back to Bo. She took his elbow again. They walked across the wet grass together to the cars parked along the gravel cemetery road. Métis was waiting in the front passenger seat of Cora's Subaru. She was 14. She was tall now. She had her mother's mouth and her grandmother's eyes and a small green ribbon in her hair. "Grandma," she said when Cora got in. "Yes, baby." "Are we still going to the Methodist Hall after?" "Yes, baby." "Mr. Donovan is coming." "Yes, baby." "Good." She started the car. They followed the small procession down the gravel road back to the church for the meal in the basement. The Iron Crucible motorcycles rode behind them at a respectful distance, then peeled off 2 by 2 at the highway intersection because the Methodist church basement was not their place, and they understood as a matter of long practice that there were rooms in this world they belonged in and rooms they did not. And the wisdom to know the difference was its own form of honor. Cora and Massey and Bo ate church basement chicken and dumplings together at a folding table along the wall. The story does not end here. The story does not end at all, technically, because Cora Pierce is still alive at the time of this telling, and Massey Pierce is in her first year at West Virginia University studying social work with a minor in public administration, and Bo Donovan is 65 years old and still goes by the cabin on Cedar Hollow Road for Sunday dinner once a month, and the Pierce Project has presented to over 300,000 individuals across 6 states, and the rescue signal is now taught as standard curriculum in 22 of those states' public elementary school systems. Travis Lawson is married. He has a son named Daniel. He drove home from the hospital with the baby in the car seat in the back. and Cora Pierce sitting next to him in the passenger seat because his own mother had not been part of his life in 11 years. And the woman in the gray cardigan, now 78 years old, had become for him something it would have embarrassed him to say out loud. The story does not end. But here's the part of the story that is worth carrying, the part that I would ask you to take with you when this telling is over, whoever you are, wherever you are, and however your own afternoons go. If you have ever stood somewhere and felt invisible, if you have ever raised a hand inside yourself and watched the world walk past it, if you have ever been the one who carried a folder in your closet for 3.5 years because you did not know how to set it down, if you have ever been the one who came down the steps, if you have ever been the one who knocked on the door of a rental house in Morgantown with no certainty that the door would open, if you have ever been the small girl in the back row of a third-grade classroom asking the only question that mattered, if you have ever been the woman in a gray cardigan on a limestone landing, if any of those people is you or has ever been you or might one day be you, then learn the sign. Teach the sign, carry it the way Cora Pierce carried it from a senior center afternoon in November of 2024 to a courthouse landing in September of 2025, and from there to over 487 presentations and counting. Palm out, thumb tucked, 4 fingers folded over the thumb, 3 seconds, silent, universal. It will not save every person who ever needs saving. It will save the next one, and the next one, and the one after that. That is the math. That is the whole story. That is the part Cora Pierce raised her hand for on a Thursday afternoon in early September on a limestone landing outside the Pocahontas County Courthouse in Marlin Springs, West Virginia, with the wind picking up and the flag snapping and a single dry leaf skittering past her tan loafers, and a man named Bo Donovan 3 steps from the bottom of the south staircase, deciding on the 4th second of the 3rd repetition that he was going to be the person who did not walk past. The rest was paperwork. The rest is still being filed. The rest is up to you.